Thanks everyone for joining this session of State of the States, Business and Policy Perspectives from Business Roundtable Leaders. We held a similar convening a couple weeks ago, and it was really well received from our leaders here in Colorado, executives from academia, business, community, and government, as a great way to really zoom out at what other states are dealing with, get out of our Colorado lens for a few minutes and think about other states that are dealing with similar challenges and opportunities as we are here in Colorado. And it's an opportunity for me to introduce some of my peers in these states to business leaders here in Colorado. So excited about the conversation today. And I want to welcome two leaders that I greatly admire. They both come from different state backgrounds and different levels of competitiveness within their state. But want to first introduce Pat Tiberi, President and CEO of the Ohio Business Roundtable. Welcome, Pat.
Good to be with you.
And then also Rob Lapsley, President of California Business Roundtable. Welcome, Rob.
Good morning, and thank you.
You're welcome. Part of the reason for bringing you two together on this call, I really wanted my folks to see our interaction firsthand. We have the tremendous opportunity to go to DC once a year together, talk about what's working in our state, what is best practices in terms of policy, some of the challenges we have, and we learn from each other. And then once a year, we also have the opportunity to fly into one of our respective states and talk about a little more of a deep dive within that state. And Colorado had the opportunity to host the other business roundtable leaders a couple of years ago. And we talked about issues around infrastructure, water, energy, natural resources that were really specific to Colorado. So some of that, I think my business leaders here, my board members have always asked me about what we're learning from other states. And we'll get into some of those topics. But the truth is businesses have a choice of where they want to grow, where they want to invest, where they want to put their headquarters. And we really live in a competitive environment where it's easier than ever for businesses to look around the country and think about what states have the kind of lifestyle they want, the workforce they want, the kind of growth that they want. So that's sort of the big picture why I want to have this conversation today and learn from each other. So we'll just kind of an opening question. And Pat, I'll start with you. Maybe share a little bit more about your background. You've got a unique background as a leader of a business round in Ohio. Would love to hear more about that. And then thinking about what you're navigating in terms of your political, regulatory, and economic environment, what would you say is the most single consequential issue, public policy issue facing the business community right now in Ohio?
Thank you, Debbie. So my background, fascinating, I guess, is one way to put it. Was a 25-year elected official, 8 years in the Ohio House of Representatives, and then in the Central Ohio area of our state, Columbus, and then 17 years in the U.S. Congress. I've now been in this role for a little over 8 years, and my political background is quite frankly been helpful in navigating some of the challenges for the business community in this environment that we're in and have been in. I would say that probably the biggest, most consequential issue that we see today, and in part because it's an election year in Ohio. We have an open seat for governor. We've got the entire Ohio House of Representatives up. A lot of primaries in May. So May is our primary election, and that makes policy and politics intersect as we speak. And the big issue right now in those primaries, and a third of our Ohio Senate that's up, number of primaries there as well, is the explosion of data centers in Ohio. We probably have the second highest number of data centers located in our state, primarily because of our boring weather. No hurricanes, not wildfires that Rob has seen, and so affordable energy makes Ohio really a great place to invest in this incredibly important technology. My argument is, and we at the Roundtable in Ohio would argue, that data centers aren't just another industry; they're They're important for the future of AI, powering AI, cloud computing, advanced manufacturing, and we've seen not only growth of data centers, but with data centers, we've seen growth in advanced manufacturing and other industries. So we are now seeing in our state, led by a populist movement, and it's a grassroots movement, but we believe it's being astroturfed by somebody and underwritten by somebody, much like we saw this on the fracking industry several years ago, but quite frankly, more successful in getting both the right and the left to be opposed to data centers. It's probably, I'd say in real time right now, Debbie, the number one issue politically. But the flip side of that is we've seen a tremendous growth of data centers. We believe that by 2030, our state's probably going to see, just based upon what's in the pipeline, some $40 billion worth of investment on the data center side, not just the hyperscalers, but others as well. And what this has meant is in some parts of our state that haven't had growth, incredible growth in construction jobs, really good construction jobs, but also local property tax revenue that funds schools. So it's been it's been incredible to see the brand names that have come to our state and spend millions of dollars and the impact that's had. Brand names from out Rob's way like Amazon and Google and Microsoft and it's Meta. It's been a game changer because it's added credibility to what has been a pretty good run over the last two gubernatorial administrations, starting with John Kasich in 2011 and now Mike DeWine in his last year of 8 years of really consistent economic growth.
Just to follow up on that, and then we'll bring in Rob. We're struggling a little bit in Colorado with do we offer incentives? Do we not? There's a lot of question about energy, available energy, water. How have you all tackled that? Did you initially start with a robust incentive system, or are you just now sort of seeing a little bit of pushback because the growth has been so good?
Yeah, well, I mean, we can talk more about that later because it relates to probably John Kasich's biggest legacy issue on economic development. But in the Kasich administration, in the first term of the Kasich administration, they put incentives. And this is, think about this. We didn't see our first hyperscaler come until 2015. That was the first one in Ohio. And we've had incredible growth over the last 11 years, not just among hyperscalers, but that was the first one. AWS had the first facility in my congressional district at the time. And it was because of state incentives that were passed by the Kasich administration.
Okay, great. We're still figuring that out here in Colorado, and the city of Denver as well has put some restrictions on data center growth here. Rob, looping you in, I could make some guesses about what is the most consequential public policy issue facing California right now. I suspect people on the call could. There might be several. It might be hard to boil it down to one, but give us a little bit about what's top of mind for you in California.
So again, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. So, California gets obviously a lot of attention for what we do, what we don't do. But top of mind right now, the number one issue unequivocally here is cost of living. And that's driven by energy policy. As we've tried to lead the country, the globe, in our climate change policies, you are seeing an incredible impact as we transform our economy through energy policy. And what that means is that we have the highest taxes, but now we have the highest energy prices by far. With obviously what's transpired in the last 2 weeks in the Middle East, our gas now is well over $5. But when you look at our gallon or our per gallon gas costs, that cost also includes $1.50 in fees and taxes in California. So, for a while when cost of gas on the average is $3 across the country, we're $4.50, but the difference is our taxes and fees. So that is just a reflection across the board of what our cost of living is. And what that also reflects is what it means from a workforce standpoint. because employers are not competing against employers for work for employees. They're competing against the cost of living in order to get people who are willing to come out here and be able to work out here. So as we see all of our issues moving forward, because that cost or because our energy prices are so high, we're exporting data centers to Ohio. We do not want to build data centers here. Literally, the legislature doesn't want them. You know, it's again considered to be kind of a dirty, even though it sounds crazy, but kind of a dirty industry. So they're doing everything they can to get rid of that. And you know, with that, we're also the last point. We're now exporting billionaires because of our tax structure. We have a new proposal from the unions this year for what's called a billionaire tax, and they are fleeing the state. So California has, again, some major challenges in front of it. And with that, if we don't get our energy prices under control, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to continue to dramatically impact our economic development.
We've seen similar policy effects here, Rob, with our oil and gas industry. We've got incredible natural resources that just 10 years ago, I think were being utilized much more fully. But because of policies, you know, I think gone awry, it's really chased capital investment out of Colorado. And we'll probably see more of that effect that you're seeing now. You're probably just a little further down the line in terms of that. Circling back, I know this is a question I had later in the conversation, but want to just give you a chance to talk about that billionaire tax that's coming. We're facing a ballot issue here on our first progressive income tax, which will be a change in Colorado. So we're going to be following that. It'll likely be on the ballot. Tell us more about that issue. I think every state is sort of seeing that as a cautionary tale of what not to do if you chase away the folks who contribute so much to the tax base. Give us your rundown on what's happening there, what maybe is the cautionary tale for other states, because if it passes there, it certainly is not going to stay in California. So it might spread to other states that would be open to it.
So you summarized it perfectly. If I could, I just want to set the scene very quickly. So California, you know, even with our challenges, we have such a dynamic economy. We continue to grow revenues year over year, especially since COVID, over 5%. We got a $350 billion budget. And we continue to spend under Gavin Newsom 9% a year. As a result, we have over a $30 billion a year structural deficit. A lot of that comes because of what the unions are doing, especially the public employee unions. So what that means is it puts pressure to be able to get more revenue from different sources. And so that is why we have the highest tax system now in the country. So the next place to solve that structural budget deficit, but what they are arguing for is to also solve the Trump cuts in healthcare, is to tax billionaires. And so what they're proposing is if you have $1 billion or more in assets, they are going to assess you, if this passes in November, a 5% tax across all of your assets, all of them. And so the only thing they exclude is real estate. So that means, right, that they grab that and they have a term of 4 years to be able to spend it. They estimate they'll raise $100 billion. And then after 4 years, we're going to have a $100 billion spending level expectation, and they're going to go back and do it again. So what it means for billionaires, we've already lost, we have approximately 220 to 240 billionaires in California, and they are leaving dramatically. And I mean it with all sincerity. I've talked to so many of them because they're calling us asking what do they do, but they're not. The unions say they won't move. They're moving. You're Florida, Texas, Tennessee, other places, Idaho, they're moving. So what is that going to mean for our revenues moving forward? It's going to have the opposite effect. It's the worst possible policy to be able to drive the job creators, as we know, out of California or any other state that tries to do this. Yesterday, Washington State passed a wealth tax, 10%. And as a result, the CEO and founder of Starbucks left today. Uh, so it's already started. No matter what state tries to do it, people are going to move to lower tax states.
Hey, Debbie, can I just add something
Yeah, please do, Pat.
that has really been something that really had an impression on me. I was a young state legislator in the 90s, and I had a meeting with a name that you all will know. He was the founder of Wendy's. His name is Dave Thomas, the late Dave Thomas. And he was an amazing man. And he was meeting with me regarding some restaurant issues. And it evolved into the fact that he had moved to Florida, and he had moved to Florida because of Ohio's high taxes at the time, high income taxes, and we had an estate tax at the time. And what really stuck with me to this day, I ended up sponsoring a bill that ultimately passed to eliminate Ohio's estate tax. And since John Kasich became governor in 2011, the legislature and the last two governors have reduced our income tax over time, and it has made a difference. But there was something else he said that made a difference to me. And it goes to what Rob just said. He moved to Florida. Dave Thomas moved to Florida, and he came back the requisite number of days to keep his Florida residency. But more than that, what he said was, Pat, when I moved to Florida initially, you know what, I just did it for tax purposes. But it came to a point where I ended up selling my big house in Ohio and buy a bigger house in Florida. And then my contributions, my charitable contributions, not, not, I didn't think about it, it just kind of happened. You spend more time in Florida, and now I'm giving more contributions in Florida than Ohio. I'm moving my cars. It just became like investments, money, time, slow over time. He moved to Florida essentially. And so we lost not only an income tax, but we lost a whole lot of other things, including his time, his charitable contributions. And there's a message there, I don't want to convince California to reconsider the billionaire tax, Rob, but it's more than just the income tax. You're losing a lot of talent
So
and a lot
completely,
of people's time as well. And it's really unfortunate for those states.
well said. And Debbie, if I can add one thing to that too, is Pat summarized it again perfectly. But number one, I've talked to so many of these billionaires, and if we defeat the wealth tax, and we can. We're well down the road. We have a plan. All our research shows we can defeat it, and we're going to fight. But if we defeat it, they'll move back. If we believe, right, that we can keep this off the books, right, for the future, they will move back. They don't necessarily want to move there. To Pat's point, they will move there and have moved there, right, to protect their assets. Because this billionaire tax requires you to the Franchise Tax Board in California to open up all your books. They have subpoena power. They can rip you apart on every single LLC, corp, everything you have, every asset. They can go into your books and find out if you're hiding something. And that is one of the most, detrimental impacts of this. And then the second thing is, should it ever pass here, get ready because it's coming your way. Because this is not a California thing. This is part of the national Bernie Sanders agenda. And so they, again, are trying to do it here, and then they'll come. Massachusetts is scared to death of what's going on out here right now for the same reasons, right? So beware, but we're going to fight to the death on this thing in order to defeat it.
It'll be great to get another update from you, Rob, as this thing progresses. It dawned on me, it's a little old fashioned, but you think about the Laffer curve, Pat, you probably know the
Yes,
Laffer curve.
yes.
Absolutely.
There's a point, I think I was talking to policymakers the other day who hadn't ever heard of it. And my point was, look, if you make the tax rate so punitive and so aggressive, eventually you're taxing zero, which means your revenue is zero. So, we certainly need to fund appropriate levels of government. We all need road, bridges, defense. We need a certain amount, but once this punitive nature comes, people just have choices, and then you're really taxing zero at that point.
Correct. Right. And
Yeah.
we're estimating, how much that ultimately that's going to mean. And it also means that folks that even before they're billionaires are leaving, because especially the AI industry here, which is helping to drive our economy right now, because we've had zero job growth over the last 3 years. But as the AI helps contribute to our bottom line, if they're going to scale here, and which right now they are, but they'll be out of here before they go public, right? Because they will not pay these taxes. And so that is already happening too.
Rob, I heard that from one of your billionaire residents just last week here in Ohio. In fact, he had told a group of us that I didn't follow this, that thankfully Gavin Newsom apparently vetoed a bill that would have had an impact on AI in California.
Correct. That's one thing that he is
Amazing.
watching carefully. Yes. We will make the argument it has to impact his presidential ambitions as well, because Tech is going to have to fund his presidential campaign. But the good news is it was a good veto in terms of policy, which is going to help the economy. So the two, in that case, go hand in hand.
Well, we're keeping an eye on that. We're not too far from you all in
Yes.
terms of geography with Colorado. And I think there's been a saying here for at least a decade or two. For some people, they say, shoot, we don't want Colorado to become like California. So no offense, but that's kind of a saying here.
We understand. Well, we already have the highest tax rate. We have 13% income tax plus a 1% mental health tax for those who make $1 million or more, right? There's a measure on the ballot this year to make that permanent. It's supposed to expire in 2030. We know with the unions it never will. So they're going to have two big tax measures on the ballot in the fall affecting high income earners starting, at $1 million. Well, actually, the high income earner tax actually goes down about 500,000. So anyway, so that's, the reflection of the unions and the greed and the money for where we are in California.
Switching gears a little bit, not that I could talk on this kind of stuff all day. Definitely that's friction for business, friction for revenue, again, that the state needs. And maybe starting with you, Rob, since you just finished that, but where do you think your state has gotten it right in terms of policy for business?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question because it really is an important question. And it's, again, as we are transforming, because it's easy to talk about the challenges. But when you come to California, right, everybody wants to make the joke, well, we get the weather right, right? So come on out, right? It's going to be out here in Sacramento today. It's going to be in the middle of March, 82 degrees. But what we really get right is, right, our innovation economy, right? We are still attracting because of our higher education system, and especially the nexus in the Bay Area, right, between Berkeley and Stanford and others, the amount of innovation, the research and development, then coupled with the venture formation, right? The capital investment that's down in Palo Alto that literally helps to drive, all the major companies that develop here is really one of the most unique things to see in real time. We have what's called in Palo Alto Sand Hill Road. That's where all the major VC firms are on literally the same, if you will, kind of campus. It's amazing how it's developed organically, but the amount of technological innovation that they are funding that literally is transforming all of us, every state, our economy in what they're doing, with AI now being the latest example. I don't think we could get it more right than that. But, the other thing is we do, right, entertainment, we do agriculture because we feed the world, and then we have global trade, right? And our logistics economy is booming as obviously we've come out of COVID with Amazon and all the just-in-time, retail now. But our ports are helping to drive both the country and the state. And then you look at life sciences, what's happening down in San Diego with all the major companies there. So we have tremendous sectors that are helping to lead, but they're constantly questioning, whether or not they can be here. We don't get right manufacturing. Manufacturers are leaving like crazy because of electricity price. We lost Yamaha, another headquarter company, yesterday. They're going to Georgia. So, but what we get right by scales that are difficult to comprehend almost.
Well, and Rob, just from a national perspective, I think about the one truly secret sauce of America is the innovators. The
Mhm.
innovators, the risk takers, the entrepreneurs, the people who think creatively and outside the box, who create things and products and services. So you're right, the Silicon Valley, is a unique part, not of just California, but of what America needs, I think, to make sure we're competitive as a country going forward. Pat, throwing it to you, we've talked a little bit about friction.
Yeah.
How does Ohio think about sort of pro-business policy? Where do you find friction, and where do you actually think that Ohio is doing it right?
So again, the comeback started at the beginning of the Kasich administration, and now in the eighth year of the DeWine administration, we've seen even continued support to make Ohio more competitive, both on the regulatory side and the tax side. And while the tax side, to which I'll get to in a minute, gets more coverage, I would say that on the regulatory side, it's had more impact. And here's what I mean by that. John Husted, who's now a U.S. Senator, until a year ago was Lieutenant Governor with Mike DeWine. He took up this initiative to cut our regulatory, uh, the regulations in half. And he did so by leading an effort called 2-for-1. For every new legislative policy, regulatory policy that was going to be created, the legislature needed to reduce two. So you're creating a new regulation, you can only do it by reducing two. And that's now law in Ohio. So if there's a new regulation, the legislature has to find two that they need to reduce. And
And
more,
Pat, just to clarify, just to jump in, was that started by like an executive order? How
it
did that
started
kick
with an
off?
executive order, but the
Hmm.
encouragement from the governor, particularly Lieutenant Governor, with a legislature that was really interested in helping, they created a law. And so on the executive order side, what Governor Husted did with all the agencies, they encouraged and pushed agencies to use AI and other technological tools to review their entire regulatory code within that agency and identify outdated or duplicative rules that they should remove. And they did a press conference after the first year, Debbie, and I mean it was incredible the amount of regulations that the DeWine administration through executive order reduced through AI and technology. But separate to that, they also encouraged the legislature to pass this new law that said if you have a new regulation that you're going to pass, whatever that might be, you got to find two that you need to reduce. And we've had so many that were so archaic and still on the books that it's been pretty significant. So that has been terrific. The other thing that has been more widely known over the course of the last two administrations is we have reduced the income tax. We now have the lowest income tax of states that have an income tax, which is 2.75%. It's a 2.75% flat tax. So we have the lowest flat tax in the country. We have one rate. There are legislators and one of the gubernatorial candidates that want to go to um, a path to zero, and we'll see what happens on that. But that has been pretty significant as well. The friction has come in. You kind of said it earlier, Debbie, is because we have reduced the income tax, there has been some challenges on the revenue side. And we do have a property tax that funds school and local governments. And because of growth in our state, because of growth, particularly around cities, the three C's in particular, mostly in Columbus, but the Cincinnati metro area as well, to a lesser extent, Cleveland, that growth has created property values to go up. Not quite like California, but for Ohio it has. But when property value goes up, property taxes go up. And so a huge advantage for us historically has been really affordable housing. That's starting to get pressured a little bit. There's a little bit of friction there. And that is something that we at the roundtable have been talking to the legislature about and talking to the governor about and the gubernatorial candidates. Because as Rob knows, if we'll get to this later, I'm sure with talent, if you're attracting talent and suddenly in areas where people want to live, it's becoming more expensive, and it's more expensive and property taxes are high, then we lose one of our advantages that we've had for a long time. And that's the cost of living and the cost of housing.
Yeah, I agree. We'll get into talent next. I love that segue. But Pat, one of the issues we've had here in Colorado, I'd love for you to address this when you think about regulatory reform. I love the twofer idea. That's brilliant. I don't know that I'd heard that enacted somewhere, but how do you adjust with rulemaking? So the rulemaking after the bill has always been, I think, just more of the headache, the disaster. It's so much more cumbersome. Like how does that affect rulemaking?
Well, there's friction there too, by the way,
Yeah.
historically. So in Ohio, we have an agency that is controlled by legislative leaders and the governor appointed, called Joint Agency Review. And so they ultimately decide, they look at the legislative intent, and they ultimately write a rule to implement that legislation. And there are times, and we have Republican control the House, Republican control the Senate, and Republican governors now for 16 straight years. And just recently, back in January, the Speaker of the House went to that agency in a public meeting and said, "You're not doing what we intended you to do." And a couple of those are his appointees, by the way. And so that friction, by the way, has been historic. But even when the one party controls everything, there's still this friction between this joint agency of review and the legislature and the governors. And that, I don't know how you solve that, Debbie. That is a challenge.
Yes. Let's do switch to talent, Pat, and we'll start with you and then have you
Yeah.
jump in, Rob. You talked about affordability. That's an issue here in Colorado as well. It probably is the top issue as we've seen politically, across the country. Some of that is housing, of course, which affects the talent that you can attract and retain. We've seen that here in Colorado and don't have kind of a silver bullet for that. We've been trying a lot of different things. We also might be unique as a roundtable. I'd love to know how you all have your makeup. We count academia and talent producers as partners. Many university presidents, chancellors on our board of directors, for example, and really feel like that working partnership, having business as co-creators of talent, having a role to play, whether it's in work-based learning or curriculum alignment, but talent development is a really critical part of what we value here at our roundtable. We're a little bit of a unique state in that we don't fund, I think, at a very high level, our university systems, which puts us at a disadvantage from a competitiveness standpoint. But tell us what you're doing. And again, Pat, starting with you in terms of talent, anything unique in terms of university partnerships, funding, how you're thinking about that from a business perspective.
Debbie, you sound like you guys are kind of where we are in terms of that alignment. I will tell you, 8 years ago when I came, we did a survey among our CEO members at the time. This has remained consistent. Workforce being the number one issue, talent being the number one issue. 2/3 of Ohio is shrinking. Those are areas that are part of Appalachia. Those are rural areas of the state where there's not opportunity. The areas that are growing, as I said before, are the urban suburban areas around the big cities, the metro areas. And what we did at the roundtable is we looked at other states, and we looked at two that were doing this really, really well, by the way, one Florida and one Colorado, that had organizations where the business community was engaged through an organization on K through higher ed reform. I know that every day the teachers union is at the legislature advocating for their issue. The business community is advocating for issues all over the spectrum. And so the thought process was, what can we do to create an organization that is representing the business community every day at the legislature, at the Department of Education, and how do we scale that? So the Business Roundtable and the three CEO groups, the Cincinnati Regional Group, the Columbus Regional Group, the Cleveland Regional Group, the four of us started an organization called Ohio Excels. And Ohio Excels, terrific organization, focused on the business community's engagement with the legislature and the Department of Education, Department of Higher Ed, on trying to create a better workforce for Ohio. We do have some higher ed, the bigger institutions, Ohio State, University of Cincinnati, Miami, Bowling Green, University of Toledo, a few others that are members. Same exact reason that you said, Debbie. That was before me, it preceded me. But I will tell you, the positives are, and I'll give you the negatives as well. The positives are there are great programs. Miami has a great program. Uh, Miami University's work program, Work Plus program, where they have employers that engage with the university in different colleges, like the College of Nursing, to create pathways at local hospitals within their footprint. Ohio State has an incredible program with Honda, uh, with the engineering program, and they hire a ton of Ohio State engineering students. And these engineering students get to work on Honda's assembly plant and research and development on AI. I've had the opportunity to go visit this. It's just amazing. But to be honest with you, the challenge that we've had, and we've looked at other states too, and this I think is a challenge in America, is how do we scale this broadly within our state? That's been the challenge. There are instances where universities and employers get it right and it's working really good, but to scale it bigger has been a huge challenge, and we're still working that through.
Rob, you want to jump in?
Sure.
Talent and workforce.
That's really interesting. So in California, we have multiple different pieces that impact this discussion and then ultimately policy. So you have what's called the workforce investment boards. And that's kind of a model that came out of almost World War II that I make the argument needs to be completely modernized because they get a lot of money and they continue to they work. We have dedicated people doing it, but it needs to be looked at from top to bottom, and there hasn't been that level of review of what is possible for that segment to do, given all the changes in the economy. For the roundtable, we're celebrating our 50th year, and when we originally formed, we had that higher education engagement. When I came here in 2012, we modernized our mission and we went to business only representation because we had to take some tough votes and make some major decisions. It wasn't fair to put the academic leadership community in the middle of that, so we did it out of respect. So what we do instead is we have multiple different other organizations, kind of like what Pat said with Ohio Excels. But we created an organization called Campaign for College Opportunity that focuses on the workforce development piece of how to go from community college to four-year college. And we've streamlined through legislation that whole process to make it automatic now that if you complete your community college, then you automatically enroll essentially in the college of your choice, including UCs, to finish off your final 2 years. With our system, we have a University of California system, we have the California State University system, and then we have the community college system. Where the work's getting done right now is at the community college level. So we have some outstanding leaders, especially the chancellor of the community colleges, who we work with closely, and has been leader of some of our other organizations. And we're really trying to focus on obviously what the business community needs, but how to create that pathway and the classes so that they, after 2 years, can actually go get a job, a good paying job, a job that fulfills what's needed at so many different levels, whether it's in tech, whether it's in, manufacturing, especially now logistics. That's one of our fastest growing sectors, but also healthcare. So this is now the pipeline to try and help, right? We need healthcare workers, but particularly nurses. We have a continual shortage. So they have restructured how we can try and build that pipeline to help all of our healthcare providers, right, in what we're doing. So this is where the focus is now, is to be able to continue that effort with the community colleges. They obviously can grow if they can adapt their curriculum to what's needed. Identifying what's needed is a constant dynamic process, right? But so that's where the engagement is with the employers, especially on a regional basis, because we're so big. So that's where our focus is.
Yeah, that makes sense. When I try to represent the views of employers, I'd be curious if you guys feel like this is accurate for you as well. When I talk to some of these talent producing leaders, higher ed, or our Workforce Development Council, I hear the drumbeat of ROI, relevancy, and speed. If you can't have ROI, relevancy, and speed, as kind of a general framework,
Yes.
you're dead in the water. I don't know how that resonates with you guys in terms of what you hear from employers.
Same.
Right. It's everything for us in terms of being able to either try and attract business formation or grow or scale here. To try and actually, going back to Pat's point earlier about the data centers, if you want to build a data center here, if you want to try, it's going to take you 5 to 7 years once you get through CEQA, which is our environmental standards, plus, what happens with, different progressive groups but there's not a cap here on litigation timelines on progress. We desperately need that. There's an initiative that'll be on the ballot in the fall to do that. But that's something we've desperately needed. It's hung up all of our housing. It's hung up our business development on so many different projects because you can sue for 10, 15, 20 years. We got one suburb in the Central Valley that's been hung up for 20 years, and they've given away open space. They've done everything possible, and they still keep getting sued. It's just a travesty, but hopefully we'll get it fixed this fall.
Let's shift gears because this is so much fun, but we're running a little bit out of time, and I want to make sure I hit a couple other topics. Pat, starting with you, I think this has been a huge prioritization for Ohio, from what I read, in terms of energy producing, looking at investments in energy, and then Rob, we'll go to you. I think this was what you were talking about, kind of right out of the gate. But how are you all thinking about energy?
We just completed our second energy study, actually. We were asked by the governor, lieutenant governor, a couple years ago. Our first one we finished last spring, and we had 6 recommendations, 5 of which were implemented by the legislature and signed by the governor. Listen, because of that reshoring, advanced manufacturing, the data centers, we have seen an incredible increase in energy need. And so as companies are looking to make long-term investments in our state, what we're hearing, Debbie, is will the power be reliable? Will it be affordable, which it has been? And will it be available when we need it, as we continue to see energy needs grow, not just in Ohio, but in our region and in the country because of AI in part. And so we in Ohio are fortunate, historically speaking, like California. We have great energy assets. We sit in an area of the country, and with fracking now, we are able to have in the Marcellus and Utica shale. We are a big producer of natural gas, a lot of oil as well, and we have an extensive pipeline and transmission network built across our state. We have a nuclear supply chain that really provides for us to move power. We have 4 refineries in our state. In fact, the unions tried to pass a law that California has regarding unionization at refineries that we were able to defeat. Rob, we like when you export jobs and people, but not not bad laws. And you know what I'm talking about, I think.
Yeah, totally, absolutely.
And so we're in the middle of this debate about how we can make sure that Ohio has, and by the way, not only um, power but water. I mean, water is an asset as well. We have Lake Erie to the north. We have the Ohio River coming down on the eastern and the southern side, so we have great water assets as well. And it's all like perfect timing here with these new two governor candidates to try to make sure we can continue that growth within our. We're in the PJM grid, which is the largest grid, and within our grid, you have you have states like Ohio and Indiana, Kentucky and West Virginia and Pennsylvania that are pro energy, but then you have states like Maryland and New York and uh, New Jersey that are not, and so there's some friction there that we are in the middle of right now too, Debbie. So it's been fascinating. We're in the midst of trying to make Ohio the next great energy state. I mean, we got it. We're positioned really, really well. This fracking, and Rob knows this well. It has a game changer in accessing these natural gas and oil reserves underneath our state, and it's a pretty exciting time, and we're right in the middle of it. The final
Well, that's
chapter hasn't
exciting.
been written.
Yeah, I love that. Colorado used to, like I said, I think
I
we
know.
used to just be much more robust about energy development. Secretary Chris Wright comes from Colorado, had several companies before he joined the Trump administration, including Frac Technologies, Pat, which I don't know if you knew that about
Yeah,
Secretary Wright.
right.
So interesting time. I feel like we're kind of on the downswing in that, and hopefully we can shore up some better policy in the future that brings more capital investment, more focus on all the great energy companies that are still working so hard here. Rob, you touched on it briefly. Any other feedback for us on the energy sector? I'm sure that's like a 24/7 job on its own in California.
No, and as always, you're right. Thank you for Secretary Wright, by the way, as well.
Yeah, I
We're
second
big
that.
fans, big fans. So
I
very
don't get to take
quickly.
credit for Secretary Wright, but I'm proud to know him.
I I think you deserve the credit. So we're exciting for a different reason. We're actually now moving into a crisis mode. The renewable side of what we're doing, while it's driving up the cost, we support all the renewables, right? The energy diversity, right? Who doesn't support that? As long as it's done, and again, Pat said it perfectly, affordably and reliably, right? So the renewable energy piece is growing by leaps and bounds, but at the same time, the legislature and the governor have been very clear that they consider fossil fuels to be the death of California. And so we now are losing two refineries in California by the end of April, part of some of my members. And what that means is that we are going to be down to 7 refineries in California as a whole. So literally within what's happened in the past year, we are now importing more oil than we are either producing, and we have plenty of oil, but they've shut it all down in terms of the upstream side. And then, we are not refining what we have previously. So that's contributing now to the cost of gas. And when I say it's a crisis, it's because the refineries are going offline at the end of April. So we're predicting that our gas prices, and it's well set from the economists, could be at $8. So and the governor seems to be okay with that, and the legislature is absolutely okay with that. So we're communicating that to the voters right now. The hypocrisy of our policies. We want to reduce greenhouse gas. They say we'll get rid of fossil fuels, but then by importing gas, we're getting it from Indonesia, we're getting it from Malaysia. It's being refined there, shipped here. You create more greenhouse gas doing it that way than you did if you let us explore and refine here, right? But they don't want that. So that's what we're facing right now, and it is an exciting time because the Air Board's about, the California Air Resources Board is about to take a big vote in May on what the next step to this is. So who becomes the next governor in California in the fall is going to determine really our economic path of whether we're going to grow, have any potential for growth, or whether we're just going to continue to muddle along in this 2/3 supermajority and progressive, agenda, and it's going to hurt us for a decade or more. That's the challenge.
We've got a governor's race as well this year, Rob. Do you as well, Pat? I know you have a U.S. Senate race.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
We have a
Oh, goodness.
race.
Okay.
An exciting one in Ohio.
Well, that'll be fun. That'll be fun to like catch up in DC and talk about all our different races.
We're going to start a betting pool.
Yeah.
Debbie, among all of us.
Our own poly market.
Yeah,
definitely.
Exactly. Thank you. Exactly.
To wrap us up, kind of final question. Want to just think through, it's interesting. And again, Pat, with your service in Congress, you probably have a really interesting viewpoint on historical context. We've lost some of this historical context and knowing how policies interact and maybe not just the policy out of the gate, but what are the effects, the second tier effects, the third tier effects. When I get to talk with all of you, it's really fun to actually learn what policies are working and why, what tweaks did you make? If you were to think about one lesson from your state to governors and lawmakers across the country, something that genuinely strengthens the business climate, and it could be from your case, Rob, like what not to do, but what's a policy lesson that helps, again, strengthen business climate, advances broader public priorities? What would it be to kind of close us out? And Pat, why don't you go first on that one?
It's not even close. So John Kasich in 2011, in his first year, he was so frustrated with government's economic development. The traditional Department of Development is in charge of economic development. So frustrated that he helped create, legislature bought into it and passed it. It was controversial at the time, a private nonprofit, state authorized, but a private nonprofit economic development organization that could move at the speed of business, not the speed of government. And it has been a game changer for our state. In fact, Rob, you'll appreciate this. When he started this in 2018, when it became official, he recruited a guy he had gotten to know when John was working in the investment banking industry after he left Congress, who'd worked at Sequoia in the venture industry, Mark Kwame, a name that many Californians know. His father was pretty active out there. Mm-hmm. And he convinced Mark to come to Ohio to start this organization for a year and get paid $1. Mark not only started the organization, he stayed in Ohio. He started a venture capital firm in Ohio. He's raising his family in Ohio. He's creating jobs in Ohio. So another great California success story in Ohio, Rob. Thank you for exporting Mark Kwame. But more importantly, Debbie, you've got the Jobs Ohio organization is an organization with the CEO and industry sector leadership. So they have an auto sector. The person who runs it was in the auto industry. Aerospace sector. The person who runs it was in the aerospace sector, and so on and so forth. And they're dealing with CEOs and site selectors personally about why Ohio. And their success over the last 15 years has been off the charts. That's why we have these great companies from other parts of the country, including California, that might come up with an idea in California, but they're building their idea in Ohio in manufacturing. And we've had two lately that Rob would know. Joby Manufacturing. Mm-hmm. They're building a manufacturing facility in Ohio. Andrill, Palmer Luckey was on 60 Minutes talking about this. They're building a huge manufacturing facility in Ohio. Now they're going to open a bank in Ohio, headquartered in California, but great jobs in Ohio. And there are so many examples like that. Amgen, another California company, has built their second manufacturing facility in Ohio. And these are really a result of Jobs Ohio. But then parallel to that, starting in the Kasich administration, we started lowering the income taxes, creating a stable tort reform system. I talked about the regulatory. So all these things together have really created a uh, a system in Ohio where businesses can see that we have a practical, long-term plan for competitiveness. And when we go to the legislature, when business groups go to the legislature, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, we don't talk about ideology, we talk about competitiveness. What can we do in Ohio to be competitive uh, versus Texas, versus North Carolina, versus Georgia, which just got that Yamaha plant? We would have liked to have that Yamaha plant. And so that's the blueprint that we have put into effect over the last 15 years.
I appreciate that, Pat. We're struggling with that. I think we definitely have economic development, but you know, the competitiveness word is something all of us in the pro-business side of the aisle, not a partisan thing, but just people who want business to grow, feel like we're talking in a vacuum sometimes,
Well,
unfortunately.
Debbie, but you like Rob have great advantages. We don't have sun all year. We don't have 72-degree weather. We don't have mountains like you have, or beaches like Rob has, or beaches. He's got beaches and mountains. So we have to think differently, and I think that's helped us.
It has. Well, we're greedy. We want to probably have your policies, Pat, and the mountains. So,
Correct.
Rob,
Correct.
Rob, close us out. What's your what would you offer as a lesson to learn for all of us around the country who are looking at the challenges you face in California?
So right now, we don't have an economic competitiveness plan. We have a group of dedicated pro-business organizations that have banded together to try and keep some sort of balance for business, especially for the key sectors, like tech, to be able to try and stay here, basically, hopefully scale here, uh, and then try and, move to the next step. We need every bit of what Pat just outlined, right? Particularly on the litigation piece now as well. Everything coming out of the legislature has a private right of action that we've been fighting. So bottom line, where we are, what we are arguing for right now is essentially with whoever comes in to be the next governor, because the current governor, that's over, is a freeze. We have 420,000 regulations in California. We need to take a freeze for a year to 2 years. No major big bills. Let's assess where we are. Let's have an honest dialogue, right, about across the board, from business development to taxes to energy and all those pieces, and take a realistic assessment of how do we move California, because the most important thing for our future now is to balance affordability and cost and economic development with the progressive agenda. And so we're pushing that hard with the gubernatorial candidates that they have to think differently on what they're going to have to do if they intend to have the revenues to balance the budget, for example. So that is where we are. And we're going to give them an economic competitiveness plan. We've already drafted one. We're finishing it. We're going to give it to them. But they have to be willing to make some tough calls, tell some folks no, particularly the unions, and just say, let's slow this thing down. Let's get it right, make some adjustments in the policies, and then see how we can, make things more affordable. That's going to be really what drives the future of the state.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming on. Pat, I should have had you gone last because you have a little more, kind of a bright, sunny optimism in Ohio.
Well, I gotta tell you, here's the difference. Yeah. It's 31 and cloudy here. So I'm sure if he walks outside, it's going to be sunny and 72.
That's true.
So I do tease
our colleague in Michigan, or I know Minnesota, excuse me, is always talking about being a headquarters state. And I said, let's not copy that. I think we should be the headquarters state, but with sunshine. And he always kind of, gives me a little growl. But gentlemen, so fun to be on and talk about best practices and challenges and, how to how to learn from each other. Really enjoyed the dialogue and look forward to seeing you both in DC in a couple months to continue the conversation. And for everybody who joined from
Thank you.
Colorado Business Roundtable, thanks for joining in, and we look forward to further gatherings. And this concludes our time together. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.